First, it came for the power grid. Then it started taking our water. Now, it's coming for the very components that make your computer run. And I'm not talking about some alien from outer space or the next Hollywood blockbuster. I'm talking about AI. We're witnessing a fundamental shift in the global economy where AI is concerned. It's not just a tool. In many respects, when we talk about resources, it's a predator. And it has worked its way to the top of at least the hardware food chain. So today we're going to talk about the great RAM shortage of 2025, which looks like it's going to turn into the great RAM shortage of 2026. We're also going to talk about how you can profit from this. If you can't beat them, join them, right? And I don't know how you beat trillion-dollar companies. We've got to do what's right for our families. And we've got to figure out ways to thrive through this evolving landscape. AI is basically driving a new wave of electronics inflation.
New tonight, the rapid growth of artificial intelligence and the data centers needed to power it are creating a supply crisis for computer memory chips known as RAM. Some fear that as big tech companies buy the large quantities of RAM, prices for things like phones and gaming consoles will go up significantly. 13 on your side's Nick Nelson looks at what we could have to pay in the future.
Tech experts are sounding the alarm over skyrocketing RAM prices as AI companies are buying massive amounts of the entire supply of RAM.
Those main factories that are usually making RAM, they're the ones that are manufacturing the RAM for these data centers. So the supply is not meeting the demand.
This is at the heart of what repair tech Kyle Hockenberry and other tech experts are calling the RAM crisis. RAM, which stands for Random Access Memory, is the standard affordable memory we use for our computers and other devices. Hockenberry says prices have spiked by 50 to 100%, affecting custom-built PCs.
I personally built my own gaming computer back in February, and the RAM, I want to say it was around like $40 for 2 sticks of 16 gigabyte RAM. But now they have spiked to crazy prices. I've even seen like several $100s to above 500 even for certain RAM.
However, it's not only those building and customizing their own PCs that will be affected, Hockenberry says. He believes that it will likely skyrocket the prices of everyday consumer technology down the line.
Your laptops, your tablets, computers, desktop PCs, handheld gaming systems, anything that uses RAM these days is affected by this.
However, some tech shoppers like Matt Goodrich say they're open to paying more to let AI develop further. He believes the market will stabilize.
Obviously, you're going to have growing pains. So you have a startup business that's using AI or not using AI at all, cost of business right out of the gate's insurmountable, and it's almost impossible to get through. But once you get profitable, things get better.
There are a number of discussions to build data centers across West Michigan, and RAM would be crucial in the operation of those centers. Nick Nelson, 13 on your side.
All right, so before we look in more detail at the RAM situation and the trail of destruction that AI is leaving, and it is a trail of destruction on one end, but look, it is a potentially profitable endeavor on another end, and we're going to look at that. But let's take a look at what AI has already done in terms of impacting our resources that we need as human beings. First, everybody knows what's going on with electricity. In the last 2 years, AI data centers they've increased their power demand by roughly 20 to 25% in certain regions, particularly Northern Virginia and Ireland. And here in Maryland, the demand is so intense in Northern Virginia that there's a big dispute in Maryland about power lines going from Pennsylvania to Virginia. It's like a gigantic extension cord. Maryland is not getting any power from this, but the demand is such in Northern Virginia for these data centers that it is just sucking up power from all around the region. Globally, the International Energy Agency, they estimate AI data centers could consume over 1,000 terawatts by 2026. Now, let me put that in a different context. That's equivalent to the entire electricity consumption of Japan. densely populated Japan. All right, we've covered both this electricity issue and the water issue, the AI water consumption issue. We've covered these extensively to cool the data centers. Okay, AI is incredibly thirsty. So when we look at the research, it shows that training uh, an application like ChatGPT-4, for example, or any similar model, it can consume 500 milliliters. That's a bottle of water, standard bottle of water. 500 milliliters of water for every 10 to 50 prompts. Okay, now you might say, well, I don't make that many prompts in a day, but how many do you and your neighbors, or you and your county, city, state, America, the world? How many prompts are we seeing made daily? Microsoft, Google, they've reported jumps of 20 to 34% in their water consumption year over year, specifically due to these AI workloads. And understand that we're just getting started, right? And they're already seeing these double digit numbers, jumps in water consumption, in electricity consumption. And now we're dealing with the, the silicon chip issue. And look, we're in 2025, right? Going into 2026, fast approaching 2030. We're in roughly the midpoint of the 21st century. Yeah, these chips are a resource. Try to get through a day without interacting with a computer. All right. Even if you're on vacation and not trying to be productive in an occupational or business sense, try to get through a day without interacting with a computer. So it's another inflationary point where everything is going to be priced higher because this resource that we can't do without, not in maintain modern society, this resource has become more expensive. So, gentleman that was profiled on that news report, he spoke of building his own computer. So why is your 32 gigabyte RAM kit suddenly costing double what it did last year? Well, it has to do with something called high bandwidth memory, HBM. And there's a paradox surrounding that. Manufacturers, take Samsung, for example, or SK Hynix, they're pulling production away from the DDR5 RAM sticks. Now, you use those in your computer, okay, your laptop, your desktop, or whatever. They're pulling production away from those that you use to build high bandwidth memory for NVIDIA's AI GPUs instead. Because the high bandwidth memory requires 3 times the wafer capacity of standard RAM that you and I use. For every one AI chip born, 3 consumer PCs lose their memory upgrades. So, see, again, we find AI taking. Are these AI videos we're seeing produced? Is this a fair trade off? In either case, AI is effectively outbidding humanity. Big tech, these $1 trillion market cap companies, they pretty much got a blank check when it comes to acquiring whatever it is they desire to push out AI. You and I are left looking at out of stock messages or higher prices. We're seeing shrinkflation. What is shrinkflation? Well, that's when the size of something or the quantity of something stays the same or shrinks, but the price goes up. Look at the Big Mac for a real world example of shrinkflation. That sandwich has gotten smaller, but the price has gotten larger. All right, so we're seeing shrinkflation in tech. So you take a budget laptop, all right, that was going for $500. Well, you're going to have to go back to 8 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe you were looking at 16 gigs for $500, right? Well, they're taking that back to 8 gigs of RAM just to keep the price under 500, under or around $500. And meanwhile, the software that you want to run on that requires much more than that 8 gigabytes, right? So you're put in an impossible position. Either way, you're going to have to spend more money. Therein resides a potential solution. When we talk about spending more money, we know someone's making money. So we're put in a position where we have to strongly consider acquiring shares of these companies that are involved in this industry. Otherwise, we are leaving ourselves in a situation where we're not benefiting at all from it financially, but we are bearing the full brunt of AI's resource drain. So, I call this AI a predator. All right. Who can benefit from this predatory behavior besides Zuckerberg, Musk, and the guy over at OpenAI? Nvidia, those entities, they're not the only ones that can solely benefit. The real winners of this RAM robbery. Yeah, guys, we're going to have to get in bed with the memory. Let's call them the memory monopoly. It's not really a monopoly, right? It's more of an oligopoly, really. But look, I don't like it any more than you do, but we have to make hard choices in life, and we're at a point where we're having to decide whether or not we're going to profit from this or whether we're going to be just 100% victims of it. Okay, so let's look at some solutions. You got, and I'm going to mention some companies, but these are not endorsements. That's not what we do here. I'm not telling you to run out and put your money into these companies. You have to do your due diligence. You have to talk to your professionals before you make any kind of decision like that. But just for example's sake, SK Hynix, Micron, Samsung, they're examples of companies that are currently seeing record breaking profit margins because they've shifted from selling commodity RAM to you and I to premium AI memory to $1 trillion companies. Okay. So take a look at the equipment manufacturers. Here's the thing, AI is out there. I'm not interested in picking a winner between Google and OpenAI and all of these other little players. I'm interested in understanding the fact that all of them need certain things like electricity, water, and now RAM. So think here. ASML is a company, again, not an endorsement. Applied Materials, they sell the actual machines that make the memory, right? So all of these companies need this memory. Who's making the memory? So as long as there's a shortage, demand for new factories and the machines that are housed in those factories, those will also increase in value and may even see a corresponding increase in the stock prices associated with the companies that are doing that. All right, packaging specialists. So you've got Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, ASE Technologies. They are companies that actually stack memory. All right. They are like gold these days. They can do no wrong. That's another way to look at this from a picks and shovels kind of perspective. What do I mean by that? Well, during the gold rush, the people who really made the money were the people selling the equipment to the miners, right? To go out there and pan for gold. Whoever was selling those pans was making a mint, right? So that's what we're looking at, a picks and shovels type of perspective on this potential investment opportunity. So that's the way you survive this. That's the way you thrive this. All right. You got to stop being just a consumer and start being a shareholder in the shortage. And we can do this, right? There's no prohibition against us going out and studying these companies and making a decision on whether or not we'd like to acquire a portion of that company. So I would say this, stay away from the actual software and application hype because there's a lot of AI hype out there right now. But the companies that are providing the physical infrastructure, the companies that are helping to provision that, the high bandwidth memory producers, and the thermal cooling companies as well that handle this AI heat exchange with water and other materials. Um, Alcohol evaporates faster than water. I wonder why they don't use that. It's got to be a reason. Anyway, that's one way to look at it. The infrastructure play, as I said, AI drives up the cost of electricity, water. So therefore, energy grid related stocks for right now. We talked about this in another video where your traditional gas and electric companies, those utilities, they might not necessarily be fit for the long run of this AI power grab, because a lot of the companies are switching to alternative sources such as small modular reactors. But there will be a time before those go online that the energy companies will continue to make record profits, thanks in large part to these data centers. So if you need a phone, if you need a workstation, if you need a laptop, you probably should go ahead and buy it now, because the other bright spot for that comes out of this from the standpoint of profitability potential is the fact that this is going to be a multi-year cycle. They're planning more data centers, all right, and our consumer electronics are going to be deprioritized in favor of AI. So we got to make some money off of that, right? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Hit that thumbs up. I look forward to the dialogue.